Unit 4, lead generation and advertising. As a real estate agent, if you're going to be in the business very long, the first thing you have to do is find some clients. And that's what this little section is about the way you find clients and the rules that affect advertising. A lot of advertising, of course, will be done on social media. And a couple of very important rules that you'll need to follow by the Real Estate Commission. One is the concept of a blind ad. Please listen closely to the concept of a blind ad. When a real estate agent runs an ad, and it's not like we run advertisements in newspapers anymore, but assuming that you did, or if you run one on Facebook or whatever, you would need to make sure that the ad identifies your brokerage, your firm. The reason for that is the Real Estate Commission specifically has a rule, and that rule basically says there should be no blind ads. What is a blind ad? A blind ad is an ad that does not identify your relationship with your firm. The logic behind this is anyone looking at that ad should recognize that they're dealing with a real estate broker. And as a broker, the only reason I even have a right to advertise is because I have an affiliation with my firm. So no blind ads. That's the first one. And then the other note that's on here is, of course, to make sure that you have the approval of your BIC. Now, keep in mind, because BICs are responsible for all advertising done in the name of the firm, if agents are concerned about whether their ads are going to violate anything, they would need to make sure that they have BIC approval. That actually applies whether you're a provisional broker or a broker. A couple of other things not mentioned here, but as you go throughout this course, you would also want to keep an eye out on, be careful in your advertising, make sure that you do not violate any of the fair housing laws or rules. Also, we don't talk about it in this chapter, but in the finance chapter, we'll talk about the fact that you have to be careful when you're advertising financial terms. For example, if you said, buy this house for only $800 a month, there are rules associated with that as well. So you would need to make sure that you're not violating those rules as well. Some rules are more simple than others. And when you're talking about the do not call registry, the most important part is just to remember, do not call people that are on the do not call list. You would need to make sure that you check this list every 30, 31 days to make sure that as it's updated, that you're not calling new numbers that are going on the list. And the main thing is that you cannot cold call to solicit business if they are on this list. This applies to residential phones, and look at the penalties there. They can be pretty severe, up to $11,000 per call on the federal level and $500 per call on the state level. In regards to the do not call laws, there are actually some exceptions, but I would ask that in the field that you probably look very, very closely on these and make sure that you have documentation. For example, you could call someone if they've actually given you an invitation to call. So if a real estate agent runs an ad and it says, please contact us for information about first-time home purchases or investment purchases. Well, if a potential client gives you their information, they're basically extending an invitation for you to call. That's okay. Document that, make sure that you can support it if necessary, even if they're on the do not call list. Also, if you have a prior business relationship with someone, now, if you think hard about this, this will actually make sense to you. Even if your past client is on the do not call list, you can call them for certain things. So for example, there are two categories of this. One, I can call someone for up to 3 months after having provided them information of my services. And you say, okay, Chris, how does that work? Well, again, the example I gave you just a moment ago, where someone hits my website and they request information from me and they give me their phone number, they basically have said that I could call. Well, I can call them for up to 3 months after they have contacted me asking about my services. Notice that it also says 18 months. This one is when I've actually done business with a client. So let's say that I work with a buyer, we closed on the transaction, everybody's happy, everybody's high-fiving. I could call him for up to 18 months after the end of that transaction, even if he's on the do not call list. Why? Because I have a prior business relationship. That's the prior business relationship rule. By the way, even the 3-month rule, even the 18-month rule, if they ask you to stop calling, you should immediately put them on your personal do not call list and not call them after that point. And then finally, another exception on the do not call list, you can call your friends and family who are on the do not call list. that's going to be okay, unless, of course, they ask you to stop calling as well. A couple of other laws to take into consideration. There is a junk fax law. And as the law, as you would expect on the law, it says that you cannot send unsolicited faxes. And this actually applies to both business and to personal telephones as well. A little bit outdated, it seems like today, not a lot of people sending faxes, but do you remember the day that people used to send faxes advertising like cruise ship lines? And even when I was on site in sales 20 years ago, we would send out mass faxes to real estate agents in the area. Law was passed after that period of time. No unsolicited faxes to either business or personal phones. And then notice that there's no limit for business relationships there. If I do, in fact, have a business relationship with someone, I could actually send them the fax. It would not be considered a junk fax then. It would be considered that we had a business relationship, again, until they asked me to stop. And then finally, the CAN-SPAM Act. The CAN-SPAM Act is targeted at sending unsolicited emails. Rather than get into detail about the CAN-SPAM Act, the important thing for both of these is to remember, if for some reason you screw up on these, you want to make sure that you have a conspicuous opt-out option. And what I mean by that is if I accidentally sent you a junk fax, if I accidentally sent you spam email, then there should be an opt-out option where you can click it and I would stop immediately sending you these unsolicited communications, okay? The next point that we're going to point out here is that the laws regarding mail have not changed. If you want to send someone postcards, if you want to send mailers, they are still very, very popular in this business, and that's okay. There's no restrictions for sending mail. There's no restrictions for knocking on the door unless a homeowner says no solicitation. So that's okay. What's going to happen on the test? They're probably going to take these amalgamation of laws, and then they're going to pick one answer from one and try to make you think it belongs with the other. So for example, on the do not call laws, it says nothing about sending spam emails or sending junk faxes, and vice versa. The CAN-SPAM Act doesn't say anything about unsolicited phone calls. So what they're going to do is they're going to take this information, they're going to try to juggle it around. So I just ask you to be somewhat specific. Do not call affects unsolicited calls to personal phones, and then unsolicited faxes would be covered under the junk fax laws. And then obviously CAN-SPAM deals directly with sending unsolicited email messages. It's actually going to be a fairly tight chapter, so you're not going to get mixed up with this if you know what you're looking for. Other laws affecting solicitation of clients. This is not a law, it's actually part of your code of ethics. Listen closely to this. The code of ethics says that realtors should not solicit the exclusive clients of other realtors. Now, again, let me repeat that so you see the important words. First of all, the code of ethics only applies to realtors. If you're a real estate agent and you're not a realtor, then it doesn't apply to you. Most agents are in fact realtors. That's one of the ways you get access to the MLS. But listen to the sentence closely here. Realtors should not solicit the exclusive clients of other realtors. Now, did you notice that I inflected on the word exclusive? If it's a non-exclusive agreement, knock yourself out, go for it. It's not going to be a violation of the code of ethics. It might be against your personal ethic. You may say, well, that's okay. Chris is working with somebody under an oral buyer agency agreement. I'm not going to go after him. The code of ethics doesn't require that you be quite that specific, okay? You can't go after the exclusive clients of other agents. There's actually a legal theory that goes behind this as well. You literally could be sued for going after someone who's under contract with another agent, and it's actually called tortious interference. Tort, like a tort, a civil wrong, T-O-R-T-I-O-U-S, tortious interference of contract. And basically what that's saying is that if you know parties are under contract, if you tamper with that contract, you're technically violating an actual law, and you could be penalized for that as well. And just as kind of FYI, as we wrap up this chapter, there is an act referred to as the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. In this case, if you were to practice unfair competition, this act could be used against you. And take a look at this. And again, this is not the real estate commission doing it to you. This is an actual law. And the thing about this law is it can get kind of ugly kind of quickly. If you're an agent, you intentionally lie, and if your lie causes harm, the courts could actually go after you for treble damages. Treble damages just simply mean 3 times the actual harm. Avoid false promises. And you say, well, what is a false promise? I understand what a misrepresentation is. I understand what an omission is. What would be considered a false promise? Well, if I were a landlord or a property manager, and I promised a tenant that if you agree to sign the lease agreement, I will agree to paint and put in new carpet. They sign the lease agreement, and then when they move in, they find out I did not do that. That is a false promise. I made that promise in an effort to get them to enter into this contract, okay? That would be an unfair or deceptive trade practice. Technically, I could be guilty for up to 3 times the actual harm. And that's actually it for for this chapter dealing with advertising and solicitation.